Add with the same sign. Orthostatic blood pressure readings. Let's look at another example. Alicia's been getting dizzy when standing, so her doctor is conducting an orthostatic blood pressure test. First, Alicia's systolic blood pressure was 2 points lower than normal while laying down. When she sat up, her systolic blood pressure went down another 10 points. When she stood up, her systolic blood pressure dropped another 20 points. What was Alicia's total systolic blood pressure change? So to answer this question, let's first write down each of the numbers and create a number line so we can visualize them. First, we have 2 points lower, which is the same as going down 2, which is the same as negative 2. On our number line, let's create a starting point and then draw an arrow that moves to the left by 2 spaces. So we're going to create the starting point, and we're going to actually just also create one and then just show that we went down 2 spaces. The negative sign in front of the 2 indicates that we are moving to the left. Then we need to move 2 spaces to the left because of the number next to the negative sign. Think back to the last lesson about temperature. The distance that we moved from the starting point is 2. Therefore, the absolute value of the movement of Alicia's pulse reading when laying down is 2. So let's repeat the same process for the next blood pressure. When Alicia sat up, her blood pressure went down another 10 points. Went down 10 points is the same as minus 10, which is negative 10. On our number line, let's create a starting point and then draw an arrow that moves to the left by 10 spaces. Once again, we knew to draw the arrow to the left because of the negative sign. Then we moved the arrow 10 spaces because the number right after the negative sign. The distance of the arrow is 10. So let's repeat the same process for Alicia's standing blood pressure. When Alicia stood up, her blood pressure dropped another 20 points. Dropping another 20 is the same as minus 20, which is negative 20. On our number line, let's create a starting point and then draw an arrow that moves to the left by 20 spaces. We'll just put this right below. Once again, we drew the arrow to the left because of the negative sign. If it was positive, then we would have been moving to the right. Then we moved to the arrow 20 spaces because of the number right after the negative sign. The distance of the arrow is an absolute value of 20. We have now drawn 3 number lines, and you can see each of these absolute values. Now, let's think about it if we added them together. One way to think about them is adding these numbers is to think about placing all these arrows in one long line using their distances or their absolute values. So let's do that on a giant number line. First, we have 2. Then we have 10. And then we have 20. Next, let's add all of them together to find out the total amount of Alicia's blood pressure change. 2 plus 10 is 12. Then we're going to add another 20, which is 32. We can show this. Like this. But that's not right because we didn't move to the right. We moved to the left. So we're going to want to add a negative sign in front of that 32. So our answer is minus 32. Now let's get a little fancy. Let's write this problem down in a mathematical form. We took the absolute value of the negative 2, added it to the absolute value of negative 10, and added it to the absolute value of negative 20. Then in order to show that we are moving to the left, we add a negative in front of all of them, like this. This fancy equation just shows us the distance that was traveled and in what direction. Keep in mind the trick: when all the numbers have the same sign, then add all the numbers together and we'll keep the sign. So negative numbers move to the left and positive numbers move to the right. So let's do another example, but this time let's use a trick. Brandon's being tested for having orthostatic hypertension. His laying down blood pressure is 1 lower. When he sat up, his blood pressure dropped another 15 points. And when he stood up, his blood pressure was only reduced by 8. First, let's start by collecting our numbers to answer this problem. We have 1, 15, and 8. And they were all lowered, so let's just indicate that negative sign on all of them. So, since we have all the same sign, let's take the absolute values of the numbers and add them. So, we have 1 plus 15 plus 8. Now, that equals 24. But because we moved to the left, the blood pressure was dropping, we need to place a negative sign in front of the number 24. This is our answer.